What if I told you there was an angel, not Lucifer, not Michael, but one far more terrifying, mysterious, and powerful, who still waits beneath the waves of the deep? His name is Leviathan, the sea monster of ancient legend, the divine hybrid that even heaven couldn't destroy. Yes, Leviathan wasn't merely a creature. He was once one of God's most secret creations, forged in the quiet chambers of heaven before the earth even knew sin. In the Bible, we often hear of angels and demons, of Michael's victory, of Lucifer's rebellion. But Leviathan's story, it was buried, hidden like a forgotten prophecy. Psalm 74 speaks of God crushing the heads of the sea monster. Isaiah warns that the Lord will punish Leviathan, the twisting serpent. But who was he before the fall? Why did God create such a being with unmatched power? And why, instead of destroying him, did he chain him to the bottom of the sea? You see, this isn't just another Bible story. It's a divine mystery, a cosmic secret. One that has echoed through ancient texts, Jewish apocrypha, and whispers from the book of Job to Revelation. It's about a creature born in heaven, but condemned to the ocean depths. And perhaps it's about what happens when glory is given too much power, without enough obedience. In this journey, we're going to explore the untold story of Angel Leviathan, his creation, his rebellion, his imprisonment, and the chilling prophecy of his return. You'll see how his fate was tied to both Lucifer and Michael, and why his presence still shakes the foundations of both earth and heaven. So, open your heart and your spirit as we dive beneath the surface of Scripture and into the mystery of the angel God couldn't kill. Let's begin. Long before the fall of Lucifer, before the garden bloomed in Eden, before Adam drew his first breath, God conceived a plan unlike any before. It was not a plan for man, nor even for earth. It was for a being, an angel, whose creation would stretch the limits of divine power itself. His name would become Leviathan, a name whispered in fear by sailors, etched into the scriptures of Job and Psalms, and hidden in the depths of the sea. But before he was a sea monster, before he was called the twisting serpent, he was heaven's most dangerous experiment. You see, when God created the archangels, Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, Uriel, they each reflected aspects of his nature: justice, communication, healing, light. They were leaders of heavenly legions, glorious and unwavering. But God, in his omniscience, saw something ahead, a time when earth would be born, when darkness would rise, and when man, fragile, tempted, free-willed, would need protection not only from demons, but from the chaos of creation itself. He needed something more, something with the strength of 1,000 cherubs, the cunning of a lion, and the power to withstand any enemy, even death. So God began designing what some ancient texts have called a hybrid angel. Not half human, no, but a fusion of divine essence and adaptive strength, able to mimic mortals, to walk among them unnoticed, and to endure the extremes of creation. Leviathan was that angel, and to him God gave what he had never given even to Michael: the ability to transform at will, to inhabit bodies, to regenerate from ashes, to divide himself into many, and to live without food or rest for ages. Imagine that for a moment. An angel so powerful that he could take the form of any man, woman, or beast. One whose soul could reach into a human's heart with a touch and make it his vessel. One whose flesh could be torn apart, burned, shattered, and still knit itself back together with divine resilience. Leviathan wasn't just strong, he was unkillable. Even hell would struggle to hold him. And perhaps that was the flaw. Because what is power without humility? What is strength without obedience? In God's design, Leviathan was meant to serve, to aid the archangels, to guard the edges of creation, and to become a force of protection when the seas would one day rise around mankind. But the moment Leviathan opened his eyes, the heavens held their breath, not out of joy, but awe. Perhaps even fear. He was beautiful, terrible, magnificent, and entirely unlike any angel before. God, pleased with his creation, looked at Leviathan and assigned him a task that had long been held by another, the dominion over the waters of the earth. Before Leviathan, it was Angel Rahab who ruled the sea, a being of thunder and tide, proud and vast. But Rahab had questioned God's choice to create man. He saw humans made from dust, given dominion over earth, even over angels in some capacity, and he could not accept it. In his pride, Rahab rebelled not with war like Lucifer, but with defiance. He empowered sea creatures, twisted the currents, and made the oceans a terrifying realm for early mankind. It was then God knew a new steward was needed. And so, the mantle was passed. Leviathan became the angel of the sea. He knew every drop of water, every current, every beast in the abyss. He could summon storms, silence waves, or sink entire ships with a whisper. And for a time, he did as he was told. But the sea is a lonely kingdom. Deep, wild, untamed. And in that darkness, Leviathan's thoughts grew bold. He was not just guardian of the sea. He was the sea. His will became like the tide, irresistible, consuming. Sailors began to vanish. Storms erupted where there should have been calm. Tales were whispered of a creature with the face of a man and the teeth of a dragon. Villages prayed not just to God for protection, but to appease Leviathan. Fear became worship, and the angel, once made to serve, began to crave the reverence due only to his creator. But let's pause here. Isn't that the story we see repeated time and again in Scripture? That which begins with light, drifting toward shadow. Saul, the anointed king, consumed by jealousy. Samson, the judge of Israel, undone by his own strength. Even Peter, the rock, denied the very Christ he loved. Power does not corrupt, but it reveals. It shows what lies dormant beneath obedience. And for Leviathan, what was revealed was pride. God watched. The one who sees the end from the beginning was not surprised, but grieved. He had hoped that even one so powerful might choose submission. But Leviathan's dominion had become obsession. He no longer asked permission to act. He simply acted. He no longer waited on heaven's command. He commanded. He began to devour, not protect. He circled ships like prey. He shattered vessels until only driftwood floated ashore. And in the heavens, a decision was being made. Leviathan, God's most powerful creation, could not be allowed to continue. But here's where the story shifts from wrath to mercy. God didn't destroy Leviathan. He couldn't, not by design. The angel was immortal, crafted beyond death. So instead, God set a trap. And that's where our next part begins. With a storm, a ship, and a trap at sea that would change Leviathan's fate forever. Are you ready to see how heaven binds the unbindable? Let's continue. They say the sea holds secrets, ancient ones. And on a quiet night, beneath a starlit sky, one of those secrets began to stir. A merchant ship, simple and weathered, creaked over the still waters. The crew spoke in hushed tones, unaware that beneath them, far below the wooden hull and coral floor, something ancient lay sleeping. Leviathan, not dead, but waiting. Waiting for the moment when God's restraint might be lifted, or even momentarily tested. And that moment, as all divine stories unfold, came not with a scream, but with a storm. You see, when Leviathan turned rogue, God did not respond with rage. No heavenly fire, no celestial army. Instead, he devised a trap, not out of vengeance, but out of wisdom. Because what do you do with something that cannot die? You restrain it. You contain it. You teach all of heaven and earth what it means to draw a line between justice and mercy. So on that fateful day when Leviathan stirred from the deep and rose toward the ship, it wasn't instinct that guided him. It was hunger, not for food, but for dominion. He circled the boat like a shadow, unseen, his massive body forming a vortex that twisted the water into chaos. The sky darkened, thunder rolled. Lightning split the clouds, not from natural causes, but as part of the heavenly design. For God had prepared something special. An electric shockwave, invisible to man, was layered over the surface of the sea, a divine net. As Leviathan breached the water, ready to crush the ship from below, the trap was sprung. A jolt, powerful enough to paralyze an immortal, surged through his form. And for the first time in his existence, Leviathan fell silent. That moment, that single act of divine restraint, reminds us that God doesn't always destroy what is dangerous. Sometimes he waits. Sometimes he teaches. Sometimes he binds. Angel Gabriel, heaven's messenger and warrior of light, descended swiftly. In his hands was a chain, no ordinary restraint, but one forged from the very word of God, laced with purity, obedience, and eternal strength. Gabriel bound Leviathan, from neck to tail, anchoring him not just to the ocean floor, but to silence, to stillness, and there he remained, for thousands of years. But the sea did not forget. The creatures of the deep still trembled. Sailors who ventured too far sometimes spoke of movements in the dark, of whispers beneath the waves, of something that was not fully asleep, only pretending. And Leviathan? In his silence he remembered. He watched. He waited. And heaven braced itself. Because in another corner of eternity, Lucifer was watching too. You see, rebellion never sleeps. And when Lucifer began to plot his insurrection against heaven, he knew he needed more than fallen angels. He needed a monster, one that could break the lines, disrupt the balance, and strike fear into mankind again. And he remembered the one whom even heaven had to chain, Leviathan. It started as whispers in the corridors of dissent, among angels who had grown weary of obedience. Lucifer spoke of a plan. If humanity had forgotten how to revere God, maybe Leviathan could remind them, not through love, not through truth, but through fear, through chaos, a twisted form of worship born from terror. Michael, ever watchful, ever loyal, confronted Lucifer. "Why?" he asked. "Why release the one God himself bound?" And Lucifer, with words like honey over poison, replied, "Because they no longer fear. They no longer bow. Perhaps a storm will awaken their reverence. But Michael, the protector of heaven's order, saw deeper. "You do not seek worship for God," he said. "You seek power for yourself." The halls of heaven shook with tension. Angels took sides. Beelzebub stood with Lucifer, arguing that Leviathan was not a threat, but a tool. Gabriel stood firm, reminding all that tools without obedience become weapons. And in that moment, heaven was divided, not in war, but in purpose. The matter was taken before God, and God, in his infinite patience, listened. He listened as Lucifer made his case. He listened as Michael defended the order. And though he spoke little, his silence said more than words. There are some powers that are not meant to be touched again. But not everyone was listening. In the shadows, one of Lucifer's followers, a lesser-known angel named Sun, acted on his own. Impulsive, eager, dangerous. He stole what the ancient texts call the axe of glory, a relic so divine it could shatter even the unbreakable. With it, Sun descended into the depths. He found Leviathan, still bound, still. And in one swift, reckless moment, he brought the axe down on the chain. The links shattered. The sea shuddered. And Leviathan opened his eyes. But freedom did not mean loyalty. Sun, proud and trembling, expected gratitude. Instead, he was consumed, in silence, in darkness. Leviathan devoured him, not in rage, but in strategy. Because if no one knows you're free, no one prepares for your attack. He returned to the shadows, silent, hidden, waiting. And when Lucifer learned of what had happened, he did not rage. He smiled, and he sent Beelzebub, not with an army, but with an offer. Because the war in heaven had only just begun. And Leviathan? He was free, but unseen. And perhaps that's what makes him most dangerous of all. But we're not done yet. Because in the next part of this untold story, we'll discover the chilling secret, what Leviathan is really planning, and what happens when the sea gives birth to judgment. Stay with me. Not all rebellions begin with fire and fury. Some begin with whispers, and in the high places of heaven, long after the fall of Rahab and the binding of Leviathan, Lucifer whispered. He didn't shout. He didn't storm the gates. He asked questions, quietly, patiently. Do the humans still love God? Do they still worship? Or have they grown lazy, entitled, forgetful? And then came the real seed he planted. Maybe it's time they feared again. You see, Lucifer understood something very human, something painfully familiar to us even today. When love fades, fear can fill the void. And fear, though cold, still bows its head, still kneels. So Lucifer hatched a plan. He knew of Leviathan, still bound at the bottom of the sea, the ancient monster even the angels avoided speaking of. He remembered the chaos Leviathan once brought, the floods, the shattered ships, the cries from sailors who never returned. And he remembered something else. Leviathan had never been defeated, only contained. To Lucifer, that wasn't failure. That was potential. If the people of earth had turned their hearts away from heaven, perhaps Leviathan's return could turn them back. Not in love, but in terror. A brutal kind of worship. Desperate prayers screamed into the dark as waves rose and swallowed cities whole. Lucifer began to move. He called councils among his followers. Beelzebub, the prince of corruption, stood beside him. Belial, Ammon, Abaddon. They listened, nodding, planning. The idea was bold. Not only would Leviathan be set free, he would become the harbinger of rebellion. A shockwave from the sea, shaking both heaven and earth, paving the way for Lucifer's throne. But not everyone was silent. Michael rose, and when he did, heaven itself held its breath. He stood before the council of angels and asked the question that pierced through every plan, every excuse, every twisted logic. Would you release chaos just to prove a point? Lucifer smiled. He had rehearsed this. They no longer bow, he said. They no longer pray. Let the sea roar again, and they will remember who God is. But Michael shook his head. No. They will remember fear. They will cry out, yes, but not from love. And worship without love is slavery. A silence settled over heaven. Divisions deepened. There were angels unsure, torn between loyalty and curiosity. Some believed Leviathan could serve as an instrument of correction. Others feared he would become a weapon without allegiance. And yet, even as the angels debated, in the shadows, a different story was unfolding. There was one among them who didn't wait for permission. His name was Sun, a minor angel in rank but not in pride. He had once admired Lucifer. He saw the boldness, the courage, the eloquence, and when the council delayed, Sun decided heaven had waited long enough. He slipped into the vaults of glory, a place where only the holiest relics of heaven were kept. And there, hidden beneath layers of light and judgment, he found it, the axe of glory. No one knows who forged it. Some say it was the tool used when God carved the heavens from the deep. Others say it was formed from the first word ever spoken, "Let there be." But this much is true. No force, no chain, no boundary, no law could stand before it. It was the only object in creation capable of undoing what God had sealed. And Sun took it. He descended alone through the veil that separates earth from the seas, through the layers of light, into the abyss where Leviathan lay, still silent but aware. It is said that when Sun reached the bottom of the sea, there was no light left in him. Just resolve. Just pride. He approached the chained angel beast and raised the axe. "Leviathan," he whispered, "I free you." The sound that followed wasn't thunder. It wasn't screaming. It was silence. The kind of silence that only happens when something eternal is broken. The chains split. They didn't clatter to the sea floor. They disappeared, as if they had never been real, as if God himself had released them. And for a moment, Sun smiled. But Leviathan did not. He didn't speak. He didn't bow. He devoured. In a single horrifying instant, Sun was gone, swallowed not out of hunger, but out of strategy. For Leviathan knew, if heaven believed he was still bound, they would not prepare. That is the terrifying brilliance of darkness. It hides in the assumption that it's still asleep. Leviathan sank once again into the deep. Watching, waiting. Above the waters, all was still. But deep below, prophecy shifted. Lucifer, upon learning what had been done, didn't rage. He laughed. He sent Beelzebub, not to command Leviathan, but to negotiate, because even the prince of demons understood, you do not command a god of the sea, You make deals. And so a new chapter begins. A chained angel is now unchained. A monster once bound now plots in silence. And a rebellion in heaven now has a weapon far more terrifying than swords or fire. It has Leviathan. But the sea does not rise all at once. And neither does wrath. The question now is not whether Leviathan is free. The question is, when will he move? Stay with me. What comes next will shake both heaven and the earth. Sometimes the greatest threat is the one we think we've contained. For many, the tale of Leviathan ends at the bottom of the sea, chained, subdued, forgotten. A sealed chapter in heaven's book, a monster turned myth. But that's only the story we've been told, not the one he's writing, because Leviathan is free. And no one knows, not even heaven. He lies beneath the waters, coiled in silence, surrounded by legends and sunken bones. Fishermen speak of strange whirlpools where none should exist. Storms form without warning in parts of the ocean that once lay calm. And every so often, just as the wind dies down, there's a deep rumble from below, like a groan or a breath. But Leviathan doesn't rise, not yet. That is what makes him terrifying. You see, monsters that rage openly can be fought, but monsters who wait, monsters who strategize, they are more than beasts. They are tacticians. And Leviathan, for all his divine rage and rebellious power, is patient. He has watched kingdoms rise and fall from beneath the waves. He has heard the names of emperors and presidents echo above his prison like wind across water. And through it all, he's listened. And now he plans. When Beelzebub descended to the depths, not with chains but with a proposal, Leviathan did not roar. He did not devour. He listened. The meeting between demon and monster was not a clash of powers, but a negotiation. A devil's diplomacy. Lucifer's forces didn't seek to command Leviathan. They needed him. Because as their war against heaven grew colder, more calculated, they required a weapon unlike any before. One that would not just terrify man, but unravel the very line between worship and dread. Leviathan agreed to nothing. At least, not aloud. Because what need does a god of the sea have for alliances? He knows that the world is already shifting in his favor. The oceans rise. Nations tremble. Faith grows faint. And all it takes is one moment. One sign. One storm. Not of water, but of soul. The book of Revelation speaks of a beast that rises from the sea, crowned with 10 horns, full of blasphemy, worshipped by the world. Some say it's symbolic. Others aren't so sure. Because if Leviathan is still waiting, hidden in the deepest trenches, perhaps it's not just a prophecy, but a countdown. A time will come when silence breaks, not with trumpets, but with thunder from the sea. Perhaps he waits for the last soul to forget the name above all names. Perhaps he waits until prayer fades from the lips of generations. Or maybe, just maybe, he's waiting for an invitation. And that is the most chilling part. Because what if the world welcomes him? What if, in our desperation, in our thirst for miracles and power and signs, we no longer ask where it comes from? What if the seas part, not like they did for Moses, but for something darker, older, angrier? You see, the greatest deception isn't when a monster wears a mask. It's when we forget he's real. And Leviathan is very real. He does not need to prove himself with waves. He does not need to roar. The world is already tilting toward him. He is no longer just a creature. He is an omen, a shadow under prophecy, a breath under the calm. And when he rises, and he will rise, the world won't be ready. So I leave you with this. Do you still believe the sea is empty? Do you still believe monsters are just metaphors? Because Leviathan believes in you. He's just waiting to see if you'll stop believing in God first. Stay with me. In the final chapter, we'll uncover the mystery behind Leviathan's eternal hunger and the one force that still holds him back. Even now, even as the waters begin to stir, some stories aren't meant to be told. They're meant to be uncovered, slowly, like ancient scrolls beneath layers of time and silence. And now, as we come to the end of this story, or perhaps only the end of the beginning, we are left not with answers, but with echoes. The story of Leviathan is not just a tale of an angel who fell. It is the unraveling of a divine experiment, the reminder that even heaven's most powerful creation can become heaven's greatest cautionary tale. We've traveled through the hidden corridors of heaven's early designs, walked beside the thrones of Michael and Lucifer, heard the arguments that split the skies and shook the sea. We've watched Rahab fall, Leviathan rise, and angels argue not over war, but over worship. We've witnessed the trap set by God himself, not out of hate, but heartbreak, a storm, a shock, a chain, a silence. And yet, the silence did not last. Leviathan was never meant to be just a beast. He was meant to be a lesson, a reflection, a question that lingers beneath every wave and every whisper of doubt. What happens when power forgets purpose? What happens when the created no longer hears the Creator? These aren't just theological ideas. They are personal, intimate, burning questions for every generation. In Leviathan, we see the mystery of God's restraint. He could have unmade him. He could have erased every trace of his existence, but he chose to bind him, to bury him, to wait. That alone tells us something vital about the heart of God. Judgment delayed is not judgment denied, but it is never without purpose. Every moment Leviathan remains beneath the sea is a moment for mankind to remember, to return, to revere. But how long will that window remain open? Because beneath the oceans of our world, something ancient still waits. Leviathan does not need an army. He does not seek worship through temples or idols. His altar is fear. His offering is chaos. And his resurrection, if it comes, will not begin with fire from the sky, but with a ripple on the water, unnoticed by most, until it's too late. In the old days, children were told not to wander too close to the shoreline, not because of tides, but because the sea remembers. Sailors carved crosses on their vessels not for tradition, but protection. And fishermen cast prayers into the wind before casting their nets, hoping the creature beneath would sleep one more day. But we who live in modern cities and digital towers, have forgotten the sea. We think science has tamed it. We think myth has been retired. But Leviathan doesn't care if you believe in him. The ocean still belongs to him. And the longer we ignore what lies below, the louder it whispers from the dark. Not with words, but with waves. If you felt something stir as you listened, if a part of your soul trembled with the realization that the Bible holds more than verses, it holds secrets, then this story is not just for your ears. it's for your spirit. Because Leviathan's tale isn't finished. And in the days to come, what was hidden may rise again. The book of Revelation speaks of beasts, of dragons, of monsters that deceive nations. Many have tried to decode them with charts and timelines, but maybe, just maybe, the truth is simpler. Maybe those monsters aren't coming. Maybe they've always been here. Maybe the question isn't, when will Leviathan rise, but what will we do when he does? Will we fall in fear or rise in faith? Will we cry out to the sea for mercy or lift our eyes to the heavens, remembering the one who still holds the chain? The choice, as always, is ours. So if this story has opened your eyes, even a little, if it's reminded you that not all angels wear light, and not all monsters dwell in fairy tales, then don't let the waves of forgetfulness cover it again. Share it. Speak it. Let others remember, because silence is Leviathan's greatest ally. But truth is what keeps him at bay. And if you want to dive even deeper into the ancient mysteries of the Bible, into the forbidden stories, the hidden angels, the prophecies that most pulpits never dare to touch, then I invite you to stay with us. Subscribe to this channel. Hit the like button. It helps us bring these stories to more seekers, more hearts, more souls hungry for something real. Leave a comment below. Tell us what you think Leviathan truly is. A symbol? A prophecy? A being? Or something in between? Your voice matters here. Your thoughts are welcome. This is not just a video. It's a journey. And you've just taken your first step into the depths. Until next time, remember this. The sea is vast. But so is the God who walks above it. Stay awake and keep watching the waters.